that's what real people in real religions are dealing with. Communities, families, helping people to grow, helping people to change their lives so that they can be happier.
Does that extend to a duty of care to every single member of your organisation? Because like Ian, I've spoken to countless ex-members of the Unification Church or Movement who talk of being isolated from their families, talk about the way in which the church took over their lives, the fact that if they try and leave, people try and... well, countless examples. Over many decades. If you're saying...
in the last 10, 20 years?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Now, if you're saying your movement's reforming, that's a great thing, and if you're looking after all of your members, in that case, would you allow psychologists such as myself to actually work with your organisation to test whether members are actually functioning healthily, like all organisations?
I had an organisational psychologist.
I will come to you in a minute, Livingston. That's good. That offer's been accepted. Let's hear from people have said. Gentlemen at the back, what would you like to see? We'll go in the audience. Quick comments.
One of the things I noticed is, like, I'm an atheist, but I saw a quote by Buddha, and it would deal with all the cults, hands down. It says, do not believe anything because you see it, because it's you read it in a religious book, because religious teachers say so, and includes because I say so. In other words, Buddha said, if I say something stupid, it's stupid. Do not follow anything. Always use your own common sense, your own reason, your own sense of fairness. Do not believe anything. And in regards to truth, well, there's a TV show, it's called Mythbusters, where they go and test out things like, can a mouse scare an elephant? So get an elephant, get a mouse, and go prove every single thing you say once and for all. So there's no accepted truths. It's the same, like, don't smoke because all your friends do. It's the same principle with religions, and like you said, it's just a case of size, or is the leader dead or not?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good morning.
As a Muslim, we define religion as, like the rabbi did say, around the Creator. This Creator is everlasting. He has no beginning, he has no end. He's the creator of everything in existence.
Do you think Islam started as a cult?
No, it wouldn't have, because before Islam, there were other religions before Islam.
Do you think it started as a cult?
No, I don't, but you know that only 2 years ago, the governor of Tennessee was trying to brand Muslims as part of a cult. And I think that what we haven't discussed yet is how threatened organized religions and atheists like Francesca feel by new religions. And why do they feel threatened? They feel threatened because things are really askew, as you put it. The economy is in a total state of collapse. Global economy is doing badly. People are without work, people are without hope, and we are latching on to anything that offers spiritual guidance.
Okay, gentlemen here,
Say something, Livingston, about Branch Davidians. One thing you forgot to mention was the sexual abuse that went on in Waco. I mean, David Koresh would come down and talk to his congregation about some of the young children he sexually abused that day. I don't know how you can condone that. You said you haven't changed. I don't have to tell you my name, but this is... You don't mind? Yeah, it's on the record. Yeah, it's on the record, Livingston. He sexually abused children at Waco. I don't know how you can still say you're a Branch Davidian.
Nicky, I didn't really come here for that.
I didn't know he was going to say it.
No, but that's the problem. You didn't come here for that. You didn't come here for that.
If you let me finish.
He has one man who says what he heard from Jesus. You've got another man who heard what he heard from Jesus. He's got another man with his own interpretation from Jesus. Will the real one please stand up?
That's why we need to look at the methodology.
Right, Livingston.
I wanted to come back to the issue of cults and religion. I understand what you're saying, and I understand how you might even perceive that, but it's not as you perceive it. And here's the thing: did you question the person that put that in your mind?
You try to tell me sexual abuse didn't go on
in Waco? No. I'm not trying to tell you that. What I'm trying to say to you...
You know sexual abuse went on there.
Livingston, let me ask you.
Let me finish.
Did sexual abuse go on at Waco?
No.
No?
No.
Look me in the eye and say that. No? Okay.
No. Now let me finish. No, hold on. Let me ask you another question. I don't
necessarily believe it, but he looked me in the eye and he said it.
Let me ask you a question. Did you question the persons that put that in your mind?
There are several witnesses to it. David Koresh would regularly sexually abuse young children at Waco, and he would come down to his congregation and he would talk about it.
All right.
And he said that
now, when David Koresh actually presents that with you, to you, and it turns out that your belief was
incorrect. David Koresh is dead.
No. Wait a minute. when he actually presents that to you, and it turns out that your belief was incorrect, are you prepared to take the consequences for that afterwards?
All
right, that's all I'm here to find.
It's on the FBI record.
Listen, the accusations of you really, I mean, Livingston, you absolutely believe you will, this gentleman will have to take the consequences of saying that about a man who was sent from, as a prophet from God. That's fascinating. Sexual abuse is often seen as, and sexual exploitation as at the very heart of many of these movements, these new religions, or some of them that have been referred to as cults by some people. And Juliana, growing up in the Children of God, you went through hell, didn't you?
Yes. I just want to take it back to the whole question that we're actually here to discuss, which is the difference between cult and a new religious movement.
Before we get to that, but people who don't know, because you know everything about the Children of God, you were born into the Children
Yes.
of God. Many people watching at home might not be so well acquainted. David Berg, another man who saw Jesus,
Yeah.
or was visited by
It's
an
the standard fare. They all think they are the mouthpiece of God, and they all have a handle on the Almighty's will.
Right.
And everybody sort of follows him as the figurehead of God. And so, you know, with that...
And there was a lot of child abuse in the movement.
There's a lot of child abuse, but, you know, it's interesting that it's not something that people go into thinking, okay, I'm going to join a cult, I'm going to, you know, abuse children, I'm going to, you know, do this and this and this. It's a steady conditioning that happens over a period of time. And I think there's a lot of scientific and psychological studies that have been done on the effects of groupthink, of when people are put into an isolated environment with extremist ideas or beliefs, what is possible for a normal human being to do to another human being. You know, there have been I think everybody knows the standard, you know, the Stanford prison test, or, you know, the Milgram's obedience test. Even Nazi Germany, you know, what happened on a massive scale to an entire race of people, you know, but they were doctors who were, you know, slaughtering children. They were, you know, people who would normally be in caring professions. It can happen to anyone, but the problem, as I see it, is that, you know, there's so much hair splitting over this idea is that, oh, are they a new religious movement? What should we call them? Should we call them a cult? Should we call them a, you know, a high demand organization? It's not. It's drawing attention away from the bigger issue, which is we need to look at the effects of what their belief system. Are they harming people? Are they harming other people in the group? Are they taking away people's liberty? Are they controlling people's information? Are they keeping people within a...
How old were you when you thought this is wrong?
I honestly never believed. I was never a believer. I never considered myself a member. I was born into it without choice. And this is there's a large demographic of children around the world born into these groups
when you saw
who aren't given a full picture of the world. They're only...
When you saw that sexual abuse around you, why did, I mean, as you grew up and it happened to you, and why didn't you go to the authorities? Why couldn't you go to the authorities? Were you a prisoner?
Well, yeah, you're kept within a compound, very much like Waco, where you're behind walls.
No, not very much like Waco.
How do you know?
I was there.
Do you know David? I was in mine, and you know David Berg glorified David Koresh and called you all martyrs.
Sure.
David Berg called them martyrs.
Yeah.
Sure.
And he said that we probably would suffer a similar fate as you.
And what about I think this is key actually. What about the attitude to people in the Children of God to those who were not? In other words, the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, within these groups is very much an us versus them mentality. So you know, you feel justified in feeling superior to everybody else because you have the truth. And
what did you call people who were not in the movement?
They were called the systemites.
Systemites.
Yeah. The police were called Romans. And people who were who we thought we could convert into the group were called sheep, which is interesting because in society there's the sheep and there's the shepherds, there's the followers and there's the leaders, there's the controlled and there's the controlling.
What has been explained? I'm sorry, what was her name?
Juliana.
What you've explained there in what you've experienced, and I hope it hasn't had too negative effect on you.
Not at all.
That is not okay. That does not characterize Waco. That does not reflect how things were with us.
I don't know the exact dynamics of what went on.
No, but what I'm saying, you made a comment. You made a comment.
Let me ask Juliana, how has it affected you?
Well, okay, for me, it's been a journey towards what I believe in my own person. But I know that other kids from my social dynamic have struggled much more than I did, and there's a very high suicide rate. Just in the first 2 months of this year, there was 4 suicides from my group, the youngest being 16. They have a very difficult time adjusting into society when they leave. They're not given the mechanisms to adapt into society. They're generally not given a good education, certainly not a formal one that they can get a job with. They're often denied medical care. There's a whole environment where there's not enough of a transparency within these groups. There are no child protection policies in these groups, and this is where harm can happen.
You have survived.
Can we not just lump all of these groups together? Because, I mean, half of my congregation, they're all across the park at Imperial College. Everyone's moved out of living in missionary centres. Everyone's got their own house, they've got a job, they work for a bank, they're a bus driver.
Exactly the same in the Raelian.
I mean, I think.
But this is why I don't believe that we should be lumping everyone together. We need to look at the effects of particular groups, what's happening within particular. You can't say that all of them are harmful.
So we need to look at the methodology. Ian Haworth.
This issue of sexual abuse has come up. Juliana has talked about that in the group she was in. I actually challenged a member, a leader actually, of that group, the Children of God, about the sexual abuse, and they said, oh, there's no sexual abuse here. Yeah. Another ex-member said later, well, of course, because we didn't define it as abuse.
Yeah.
We said if we were having sexual relations with children, that was done in love, and therefore it wasn't abuse. Well, I mean,
so Rabbi Shockett, what are the bad effects been? That, psychologically, the brain is a very vulnerable organ, isn't it?
It is indeed. But let's be very clear. There's a lot of banter here about believing in or having monopoly on truth. In essence, logically, rationally, if you belong to any particular faith, you have to obviously believe that that is absolute truth to the exclusion of all others. Otherwise, you have no business believing in that faith in the first instance. The problem is when it spills over into excess such that you then have disregard for people of other faiths and say that if you're not a member of my faith, then you are just not a good human being and that you serve no purpose in life. That's where it all goes wrong. And essentially, if you go around over here amongst this front row, when they're sitting in Waco, as far as they're concerned, unless I embrace that way of life, then essentially I'm damned to hell. Frankly, as far as he's concerned, if I don't embrace Jesus, Rabbi, I'm damned to hell as well. And that's where there is the problem.
Is he damned to hell?
That is not true.
No, he says you're not damned to hell.
No,
and you don't believe in the New Testament?
I do. Hang on a second. It's ridiculous. See, the thing is, we all have to recognize, and this is where we start, for me, we all have to recognize we all fail. We're all messed up people. None of us are perfect. All right. Now, I believe that the only way of having those failures covered over.
The only way.
Yeah, the only way is through Jesus.
Right.
So I don't believe that Jesus is going to send me to hell if I don't believe in him.
Is he going to send him to
hang on.
Answer the question.
Let me finish the sentence.
Answer the question. If I don't embrace Jesus, what's my destiny?
If you continue living the life that you live, like anyone else,
like all of us,
sinful
life that you live.
But all of
I've
us.
seen you drinking whiskey.
And I am just as messed up, probably more messed up than the rabbi, right? In my life. But the problem is, I think that God sent out this way of mercy. So it's not God that actually sends me to condemnation. I send myself to condemnation. And God's the one that saves.
But you didn't answer my question.
I answer
if I don't embrace
you can
Jesus,
answer it. Levis is going to answer your question. Then I'm going to move on to a comparatively new religion which calls itself a church but is nothing to do with God. Answers on a postcard. That's just in a minute.
Rabbi Shockett, that judgment is left to God. Not to him, not to me, not to any other human being. Even Christ says, remember Matthew 7, judge not, lest you be judged, for whatever judgment you meet, be meet to you.
Or is it left to your subjective interpretation of what God said, which can be very different to his subjective?
So you've judged my interpretation to be subjective.
To what his interpretation.
You judge my interpretation to be subjective. That's your judgment of me.
And that's why every movement and every cult and every religion should be held up to scrutiny. And if there's objective criteria by which to determine the authenticity of the faith, then great. If not, it falls down.
Everything.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Some people in new religion speak in emphatic terms about everything. Wait a minute, everybody. Let's move on. Let's move on, and I'll get a chance to come back to you, hopefully. Right, okay. If not in this life, in the next. All right. But we've... John. I know that, Glenn. John, former Scientologist.
Yes.
Right. What's the leaving like?
It's a very baffling experience, particularly, and I think this may be something that defines a cult, because of the attack that you receive from the group. Because when you're expelled, you're shunned, you're disconnected from.
Now let's just make it clear at this stage.
And if the Raelians don't do that,
I'm going to make it clear on your behalf. We're not generalising. We're not saying all these groups are like this. We're talking about this particular
Yes, and that's
group.
great, and that's perfect. But I think what's not coming clear from what I'm hearing is people are saying here, what's happening with cults is this, and yet I'm classed in this meeting as a cult, and I'm telling you
we
now,
are identifying problematic techniques that are sometimes used, and let's further explore
and I agree with
those.
that, and that's a valid thing. But
let's explore them with
clarity is
John.
important.
All right.
Could I perhaps interpose a definition?
That'd be nice.
This is from the American Family Foundation in 1985. A cult, a totalist cult, to give it a full definition, is a group or movement exhibiting a great or excessive devotion or dedication to some person, idea or thing, and employing unethical, manipulative or coercive techniques of persuasion and control.
That's the key bit.
Designed to advance the goals of the group's leaders to the possible or actual detriment of members, their families or the community. And I'm not accusing anybody of being a cult.
I want to hear a story. I want to hear a story, and I'll come to you if I can. Right, okay. So you had to pay quite a lot of money to progress through the courses over a number of years.
I met somebody who'd given $2 million to Scientology and ended up in hospital.
And you eventually qualified, you paid for courses to progress up to 26 levels, and you reached the level whereby you were made privy to the secret.
Yes.
What's the secret?
The secret is that we're all composed of millions of little beings. We're not individuals, and so our thoughts and our feelings are confused by this. And so the idea is to extract ourselves from these clusters of little beings. Body thetans, yes.
Yeah, which came from an intergalactic war.
Yes. 75 million years ago, the sector of the galaxy.
You're channeling L. Ron Hubbard now, aren't you?
Very nearly, yeah.
So, why, just supposing, let's take a leap of imagination, just supposing this is nonsense, this thetan business, just supposing it's not true for 1 second, why do sane, rational, intelligent human beings buy it, literally, and buy into it?
Well, it's a secret. I've been a member for 7 years before this was put to me. So, you know, I'd gone along that road for a long way. And in fact, the day that I opened the pack to these materials, I said, this is like Colin Wilson's novel, The Mind Parasites. It didn't make sense to me. But I said, I've been on this road for 7 years. I'll check it. I'll see. And I still never did feel convinced. And 2 years later, I left.
And how long is it? Are you still getting over it?
No. It's nearly 30 years ago since I left. But I think the problem with people who leave is they often consider the emotional experiences they had rather than questioning the truth of the teachings. Yeah. Scientology claims to be scientific. So if you look at its tenets and discuss them openly, you find it's not scientific.
And L. Ron Hubbard, he said he preached against drugs. That's no bad.
Yet he himself admitted to having been a barbiturate addict in a lecture. And he tried to cash prescriptions in East Grinstead in the 60s so that he could give barbiturates to plants, he said.
But this is interesting, isn't it? You don't know, Christina, you don't know what it's about until you're, well, everyone knows now the secret's out. Not here, but previously.
Read my book.
That's one of the best plugs I've ever heard. But you don't know the secret until you're well into it, Christina.
Yes, that's true. And I think
you don't really know what the beliefs are.
But that is a very good magnet for people who are feeling vulnerable and confused. The mystery, the unfolding mystery.
Seduced.
Yes.
Yes.
And yet when viewing it from a distance, Judge Leahy in the mid-80s described it as corrupt, sinister and dangerous. Those are strong words to use, and so again we have to look at the methodology within a group. Why is it that people take on board a particular worldview? If it's through free choice, fine. If it's not, that's a serious problem.
George, we haven't heard from George yet. I'm over the side now, so we've got to... I'll come along. George.
No, I think throughout this programme we've tended to polarise the discussion, and we've done it right from the start. That what's the difference between a religion and a cult? As if you've got religions there and cults there.
That wasn't the idea cults, that we had in mind. I agree with this gentleman.
Cults brainwash you, it's psychological coercion, it's a charismatic leader.
Well, Francesca was saying from right at the top, there is very little distinction if you look at it. It's just a matter of scale.
But that's what makes it so.
Not everyone's saying that.
But if you looked at the list that you put up at the beginning of the programme, if you take something like Opus Dei, now it's actually part of the Roman Catholic Church. It's been approved by the Pope. It's heavily criticised
around the world,
which is precisely my point. Sorry, can you let me finish here, please?
I'm just responding.
but it's part of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, it's controversial, but it's precisely my point. Which category do you put it in? Is it part of religion, or is it something that's different? And I think we've tended to say, well, religion, mainstream religion has got sensible beliefs. Cults have got these kind of funny beliefs.
We haven't said that. Some people have said that. Some people haven't said that. So I think you're being a little bit selective in your hearing.
And I have to support this gentleman here because in general, the conversation has been the split between religion and cults. And the conversation, what's been said, is a generalization rather than actually address specific areas. And quite frankly, I think this obscures what's really going on. That is to say, if we're trying to find meaning. But if we're just trying to have a little circus here, then we're having it.
What's really interesting about the debate is when I employed, and I know nothing about this gentleman's sexual habits, by the way, but when I employed exactly the same technique, of casting aspersions without any evidence whatsoever, I was called ridiculous. And yet, when this is happening on the front row here, it's thought of as, oh yes, these movements are dangerous. But the fact is, the techniques of criticism are from that side, and they are all generalised. There are one or two absolutely real. There are some real, very important...
Wait. Let's explore a technique in a second. One of the techniques, a cultish practice. We're not talking about groups per se being cults. We're talking about cultish practices within groups, whether they be sects, whether they be parts of religions, or whatever. You've had your hand up for so long.
You were talking about your definition, first of all, of what counts as a cult. A lot of those words that you used are actually subjective, that this is manipulative. One person's manipulative is another person's selling technique, etc., etc. And you talk about separation, and I'm sure that lots of people have experienced when they belong to established religions and they decide to marry somebody that is not of their faith, and their families get very upset and they don't speak to them, and people won't have green carpets because they're Protestant.
So what's the difference? This was our original contention.
They use separation. All groups, political parties, religions, they all use we know what's best, those people are doing it wrong.
Barbara, tell us about Tom, your son.
Right. My son is involved with an organisation that's based on the internet. It's not a religion. It's run by an atheist who lives in Canada, who is an entrepreneur. He has set up a structure which earns him a living from voluntary donations and subscriptions to the podcasts, the books that he produces.
It's about philosophy, isn't it?
That's
Politics,
right.
Philosophy,
it's
so-called free thinking.
Apparently the biggest philosophy show on the internet. My son was studying philosophy and critical thinking when he was at school. He was about 16 when he first came across this website. I imagine he Googled philosophy podcasts, and there was an introduction to philosophy by this man who is very charismatic and says unusual things in quite a gripping way, and he can tell you how to be free. He can really help you achieve personal freedom. All you have to do is listen to some of his podcasts, starting at the beginning of 2,500, read his books as well. Voluntary donations, please, because we can't run this without you. Just had a bill for the server. When you listen to the podcasts, it's not so much about philosophy, it's about how evil your parents were, how you were abused as a child because you didn't ask to be born. That was an unequal relationship, therefore it's an abusive relationship. It's nothing to do with sexual abuse, physical abuse, beating, whatever, even emotional abuse of raising a voice or shouting at a child or shouting that they're stupid. It can be just asking them to clean their room, asking them to tidy up, lay the table. Very simple things. Do your homework. Things that parents say routinely to their children as they're growing up. That's abusive, apparently. So you should get abusive people out of your life. You should only have voluntary relationships. And that means you should cut yourself off from your parents.
How long since you've seen Tom?
4 years. 4 years this month, in fact. He's alive and well. I'm not sure what part of the country he's in anymore. He's very much involved with this organisation still. He's close friends with some of the inner circle, and I can't see him coming out of it as long as this charismatic leader is still alive. The advert for the show, it's growing very popular in across the world, not just in America and Canada, where it's largely based, but also in the UK, Australia, Europe. It's like an internet radio show. So there's a weekly show, which is live on a Sunday evening. There's podcasts
I bet Rod
as
can,
well.
Rod can enlighten us further here, Barbara. It's an incredibly powerful story. We were saying earlier on, the brain can be very malleable and very vulnerable, and Tom, paradoxically, was studying critical thinking. But all the critical faculties seem to just disintegrate in some... Are we all vulnerable?
I think all people are vulnerable to being manipulated and to also having their psychology taken over by any group or organisation, and it can be a religious group or it can be a political group.
Why might this particularly hit home with Tom?
Because it offers ultimate truths, and on their own there's nothing wrong with that, but if that means cutting yourself off from your family, cutting yourself off from your career, giving your possessions away, if it takes over your life, the evidence is now becoming very clear in the literature that when groups take over in that way, when they become totalistic, that has a serious psychological effect on individuals, as well as destroying their life chances over the period during which they're involved. And the question to that group, the same to any other organisation, in my view, is what are you doing to look after your members? Now, the fact is that the law doesn't apply equally at the moment to voluntary organisations or to religions. The Health and Safety at Work Act, for example, that has the duty
or
of care.
multinational organisations as well.
Multinational. And the fact is that I welcome any organisation that says that it's prepared to open itself up to that scrutiny, that says that it'll allow...
Which Simon has to you this
morning.
morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I welcome that.
And the Raelians have as well.
But I would say that those groups that don't, those groups that try and allow the argument to go forward, that somehow their beliefs allow them to do anything to anybody, those are the groups that I would describe as destructive cults, because they elevate belief beyond anything, and it actually doesn't matter anymore, the effect that has on people.
I agree with him. I think that there's no system of checks and balances within these groups, and I think that people are afraid to step on the toes, step on people's religious right to religious freedom, and yet forget about the effect that you have the right to believe whatever you want, but the moment that your belief infringes on another's rights...
I'm going to give you the last word, Cole, on this. Your thoughts?
Well,
40 seconds.
My thoughts are there will be people sitting at home thinking, well, I sort of believe in God, and I sort of I'm looking for truth in my life. But what I've heard today is a great number of people are all saying, I've got the truth because Jesus told me individually. And actually, what I look for in a belief system is a belief system that's about personal freedom, but also about community and belonging, and allows me to express that and to also have an appreciation for the people around me who might have different belief systems. I've heard that this morning from some of the people who are in this room, and I've not heard it from others, and those are the ones that concern me.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. As ever, the debate continues on Twitter, online. We're not on next week because it's Whitsun. We'll be in Glasgow June the 3rd. From now, goodbye from everyone here in London, and thank you very much for watching.
I mean, like the rabbi did say, around the Creator. This Creator is everlasting. He has no beginning, he has no end. He's the creator of everything in existence.
Do you think Islam started as a cult?
No, it wouldn't have, because before Islam, there were other religions before Islam.
Do you think it started as a cult?
No, I don't, but you know that only 2 years ago, the governor of Tennessee was trying to brand Muslims as part of a cult. And I think that what we haven't discussed yet is how threatened organized religions and atheists like Francesca feel
just such as myself
Absolutely.
to actually work with your organisation to test whether members are actually functioning healthily, like all organisations.
I had an organisational psychologist.
I will count in a minute, Livingston. That's good. That offer's been accepted. Let's hear from people who said, gentlemen at the back, what would you like to say? We'll go in the audience. Quick comments.
One of the things I've noticed is, like, I'm an atheist, but I saw a quote by Buddha, and it would deal with all the cults, hands down. It says, do not believe anything because you see it, because it's you read it in a religious book, because religious teachers say so, and includes because I say so. In other words, Buddha said, if I say something stupid, it's stupid. Do not follow.
That's what real people in real religions are dealing with. Communities, families, helping people to grow, helping people to change their lives so that they can be happier. And
does that extend to a duty of care to every single member of your organisation? Because like Ian, I've spoken to countless ex-members of the Unification Church or Movement who talk of being isolated from their families, talk about the way in which the church took over their lives, the fact that if they try and leave, people well, countless examples. Over many decades. If you're saying...
In the last 10, 20 years?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
Now, if you're saying your movement's reforming, that's a great thing, and if you're looking after all of your members, in that case, would you allow psychology?
Anything, always use your own common sense, your own reason, your own sense of fairness. Do not believe anything. And in regards to truth, well, there's a TV show, it's called Mythbusters, where they go and test out things like, can a mouse scare an elephant? So get an elephant, get a mouse, and go prove every single thing you say once and for all. So there's no accepted truths. It's the same, like, don't smoke because all your friends do. It's the same principle with religions. And like you said, it's just a case of size, or is the leader dead or not?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good morning.
As a Muslim, we define religion as...
by new religions. And why do they feel threatened? They feel threatened because things are really askew, as you put it. The economy is in a total state of collapse. Global economy is doing badly. People are without work, people are without hope, and we are latching on to anything that offers spiritual guidance.
Okay,
gentlemen here, yeah.
Say something, Livingston, about Branch Davidians. One thing you forgot to mention was the sexual abuse that went on in Waco. I mean, David Koresh would come down and talk to his congregation about some of the young children he sexually abused that day. I don't know how you can condone that. You said you haven't changed. I don't have to tell you why.